October 19th, Sunday morning. Paris awakens to what should have been an ordinary autumn day. But inside the Louvre Museum, the most visited cultural institution on Earth, something extraordinary was about to happen. Something that would expose vulnerabilities no one imagined existed. In exactly 7 minutes, a team of thieves would execute one of the boldest museum robberies in modern history. Not through elaborate tunnels, not through sophisticated hacking, but through a method so audacious, so brazen, that security experts are still analyzing how it succeeded. This is the story of how France's crown jewels were stolen in broad daylight, and why the world's most protected museum couldn't stop it. Understanding this heist requires understanding its sheer brazenness. Most museum robberies follow predictable patterns. Criminals wait for darkness. They disable alarms methodically. They work in silence, in shadows, when buildings are empty and guards are few. The Louvre thieves did the opposite. They struck at 9:30 a.m., 30 minutes after the museum opened its doors. Not when the building was empty, but when it was filling with visitors. Not in darkness, but in full daylight. Not quietly, but with power tools and crashing glass. The target they chose revealed sophisticated planning. The Apollo Gallery, Galerie d'Apollon, houses France's crown jewels. Not replicas, not reproductions, the actual regalia of French monarchy. Sapphires worn by queens, emeralds that adorned empresses, diamonds that witnessed centuries of French history. These pieces rest behind reinforced glass in one of the museum's most heavily monitored sections. Security cameras cover every angle. Sensors detect any disturbance. Armed response teams can arrive within minutes. Yet the thieves believed they could breach these defenses, steal priceless artifacts, and escape before anyone could stop them. They were right. The method they employed was ingenious in its simplicity.
No sophisticated technology, no Ocean's 11-style electronics, just a construction truck with a hydraulic lift. Equipment so common on Paris streets that nobody gives it a second glance. These trucks appear daily throughout the city, hoisting furniture into apartments through windows because the narrow staircases can't accommodate large items. Parisians see them constantly. They're part of the urban landscape, invisible through familiarity. The thieves understood this psychology perfectly. They dressed as construction workers, another invisible profession in a city constantly renovating its historic buildings. They positioned their truck along the Seine riverbank, facing the museum's second-floor windows. And then, they went to work. The timeline of the robbery reveals meticulous planning. 9:30 a.m. The hydraulic lift extends toward a specific second-floor window. Not a random choice. This particular window provided direct access to the Apollo Gallery, while being partially obscured from street view by trees lining the Seine. The team consisted of 3 to 4 individuals, all masked, all dressed identically in worker uniforms. Their movements suggested rehearsal, no hesitation, no confusion. Every action flowed into the next with mechanical efficiency. They reached the window. Power tools, heavy-duty equipment capable of cutting through reinforced frames began their work. The noise was significant, but in a city where construction noise is constant, who pays attention? The glass shattered. Immediately, alarms activated throughout the museum, high-pitched warnings that should have meant the end of any robbery attempt. But the thieves continued working, calmly, methodically, as if the screaming alarms were irrelevant background noise, because they understood something crucial about museum security protocols. When alarms sound during visiting hours, security personnel have one overriding priority: Visitor safety. Guards don't rush toward the threat.
They rush toward the crowds. They begin evacuation procedures. They herd confused tourists away from potential danger. They call police. They follow protocols designed to prevent civilian casualties, all of which takes time. Precious minutes when armed response isn't converging on the criminals, but is instead managing hundreds of panicked visitors. The thieves had counted on exactly this response. They'd planned around it. Inside the Apollo Gallery, they moved directly to specific display cases. Again, no hesitation, no searching. They knew exactly which cases held the most valuable pieces: the sapphire crown necklace, the Empress Eugenie's emerald and diamond set, jewelry that had belonged to Napoleon III's wife, historical artifacts whose value transcends mere monetary calculation. They produced heavy-duty tools, pneumatic cutters, industrial saws, equipment that should have raised questions when they entered, except they'd entered through a window, bypassing all entry screening. The reinforced glass cases, designed to withstand casual vandalism, couldn't resist this level of assault. The thieves shattered 2 display cases in rapid succession, grabbed the jewelry inside, secured it in bags designed for quick transport. Total time from window breach to theft completion, approximately 4 minutes. Then came the escape, equally well choreographed. The thieves climbed back through the broken window, onto the hydraulic lift, and descended to street level. Waiting at the base were 2 accomplices on motorcycles, vehicles chosen for their ability to navigate traffic and disappear into the urban maze. The thieves mounted the motorcycles and vanished into the streets bordering the Seine. By the time armed police arrived at the museum, response time estimated at 6 to 7 minutes, the criminals were already blocks away, blending into normal Sunday traffic. Total operation time? 7 minutes from first contact with the window to final escape. 7 minutes to steal artifacts worth tens of millions of euros and priceless in historical significance.
7 minutes that exposed fundamental vulnerabilities in security systems designed over decades. The precision of the heist immediately triggered investigations beyond simple robbery. Too many elements suggested inside knowledge. Consider the specifics. The thieves knew exactly which window to target. In a building with thousands of windows, they chose the one providing direct access to the Apollo Gallery with minimal exposure to street-level observation. They knew which display cases contained the most valuable items. The Louvre houses 380,000 objects across 72,735 square meters. Yet these thieves moved directly to specific cases, as if following a map they'd memorized. They understood security protocols, knew that alarms during visiting hours would trigger evacuation procedures rather than immediate armed response, timed their attack for maximum crowd presence to maximize security distraction. They brought appropriate tools, not generic braking equipment, but specific industrial gear suited to defeating reinforced display cases. This suggests detailed knowledge of case construction, information not publicly available. Most tellingly, they executed the robbery during ongoing renovation work at the museum. Workers in uniforms carrying equipment wouldn't raise suspicions during a period when such presence was routine. This timing couldn't be coincidental. French investigators quickly developed working theories. Either the thieves had conducted extensive reconnaissance, risky in a heavily monitored facility, or they'd received information from someone with intimate knowledge of the museum's operations. The renovation work provided natural cover, but it also created opportunity. additional personnel on site, temporary changes to normal security patterns, equipment and materials moving through the building, all factors that could be exploited by someone who understood the routine. Within days of the robbery, investigators began interviewing current and former security staff, renovation contractors, and anyone with detailed knowledge of the Apollo Gallery's layout and security systems. The search for potential inside collaborators became as intensive as the hunt for the thieves themselves. Understanding how this robbery succeeded requires understanding the complexity of securing the world's most visited museum. The Louvre receives approximately 10 million visitors annually. On busy days, 30,000 people pass through its galleries. Managing this human flow while protecting 380,000 artifacts presents challenges unique in the museum world. Security operates in layers, each designed to address specific threats. Layer 1. Entry screening. All visitors pass through security checkpoints equipped with metal detectors and X-ray scanners. Guards screen for weapons, explosives, anything that could threaten people or artifacts. The system works well for standard entry points. But it assumes entry through doors. The thieves bypassed this layer entirely by entering through a window, a vulnerability that security protocols haven't adequately addressed despite being obvious in hindsight. Layer 2. Human surveillance. The museum employs hundreds of security personnel. Guards patrol galleries during visiting hours, monitoring both crowd behavior and artifact safety. Cameras provide additional coverage, with feeds monitored in central security stations. According to museum statements, 4 to 5 guards were stationed in and around the Apollo Gallery at the time of the robbery. Yet none could respond effectively to the breach because protocol demanded they prioritize visitor evacuation over confronting potentially armed criminals. This reveals the paradox. The very presence of crowds, which generates revenue and fulfills the museum's educational mission, creates security vulnerabilities by forcing guards to protect people rather than objects during emergencies. Layer 3. Technological systems. The Apollo Gallery features state-of-the-art security, motion sensors, vibration detectors, glass break sensors, cameras with facial recognition capabilities. Every case is monitored, every movement recorded. The alarms functioned perfectly. They detected the breach immediately. But alarm detection is only useful if response can prevent theft. In this case, the thieves completed their mission before armed response could arrive, a timing gap they'd clearly calculated in advance. Layer 4. Physical barriers. Display cases use reinforced laminated glass designed to resist casual attacks. The Apollo Gallery cases had been upgraded with enhanced security features following previous concerns about artifact protection. Yet these barriers were designed primarily to slow or deter opportunistic thieves, not to resist sustained assault by criminals wielding industrial equipment. The thieves brought tools specifically chosen to defeat these protections, again suggesting detailed advanced knowledge. The renovation factor. Perhaps most critically, the museum was undergoing renovations during the robbery. This created several vulnerabilities. Construction materials and equipment throughout the building normalized the presence of workers with tools. The thieves' disguises became perfect camouflage. Temporary changes to normal routines created inconsistencies in security patterns. Guards dealing with construction-related disruptions had divided attention. The presence of legitimate workers with legitimate reasons to be in restricted areas made identifying unauthorized personnel nearly impossible until they'd already acted. Investigators would later determine that the renovation schedule was publicly available information. Anyone planning a heist could have identified this window of vulnerability and exploited it systematically. The robbery's impact extended far beyond art crime. It became a political crisis for President Emmanuel Macron's government. Macron's immediate response was forceful. He expressed outrage publicly, promised full resources to recover the stolen pieces, and vowed accountability for security failures.
But in France's current political climate, marked by protests, strikes, and opposition challenges to Macron's authority, the robbery became ammunition for critics. Opposition politicians seized the incident as evidence of broader government incompetence. If Macron couldn't protect France's cultural heritage, they argued, how could he protect France itself? The symbolism was devastating. The Louvre isn't merely a museum, it's a national icon, a symbol of French cultural supremacy, housing artifacts that represent centuries of French history and power. Allowing thieves to violate this space struck at French national pride. Conservative politicians questioned security funding decisions. Had budget constraints compromised protection of irreplaceable heritage? Had Macron's government prioritized other spending over cultural security? Left-wing critics attacked from different angles. They pointed to increasing privatization of museum security services, guards hired through contractors rather than direct government employment. Had cost-cutting through privatization created vulnerabilities? Even centrist voices raised uncomfortable questions. The Louvre had received security upgrades in recent years, specifically to address vulnerability concerns. Yet these improvements hadn't prevented a daylight robbery during peak visiting hours. What had gone wrong? Macron found himself defending not just museum security, but his entire administration's competence. In a country where culture carries immense political weight, the theft of crown jewels felt like a theft of French dignity itself. The government responded by promising comprehensive security reviews across all national museums, increased funding for protective measures, enhanced screening procedures. But critics noted these were reactive measures, closing the stable door after the horse had bolted. Understanding the stolen item's significance requires understanding their historical context.
The Royal Sapphire Necklace. This piece represented French monarchy at its height. Crafted for royal occasions, worn by queens during state ceremonies, it symbolized the divine right of kings and the glory of the French crown. Its monetary value, while enormous, pales beside its historical significance as a tangible link to France's monarchical past. The Empress Eugénie collection. Emeralds and diamonds that belonged to Eugénie de Montijo, wife of Napoleon III. These pieces witnessed the Second French Empire, an era of transformation when France reasserted itself as Europe's dominant cultural power. Eugénie herself was a fascinating historical figure, a Spanish-born empress who influenced French fashion, politics, and cultural development during the mid-19th century. These weren't merely beautiful objects, they were witnesses to history. They'd been present at events that shaped Europe. They carried stories of triumph and tragedy, power and downfall. Their theft represented more than financial loss. It severed physical connections to French heritage. Each piece stolen was a chapter of history made inaccessible to current and future generations. The estimated monetary value runs into tens of millions of euros. Though experts note such figures are somewhat meaningless, these artifacts are functionally priceless, irreplaceable objects whose true value transcends market economics. More importantly, they're nearly impossible to sell through legitimate channels. Any reputable auction house or dealer would immediately recognize them. International art crime databases would flag them instantly. Their images are known worldwide. This creates an interesting question. What do thieves do with artifacts this recognizable?
Several possibilities exist. They might ransom them back to the French government or the museum. Historical precedent exists for such negotiations, though governments officially refuse to negotiate with criminals. They might sell to private collectors who knowingly acquire stolen art, a shadowy market that definitely exists but operates entirely outside legal systems.
They might disassemble the pieces, destroying historical artifacts to harvest gemstones that could be sold individually. This would be cultural vandalism of the highest order, but criminals motivated by profit rather than preservation might consider it. Or they might simply be holding the pieces, waiting for attention to fade before attempting disposal. Some stolen artworks remain hidden for decades before resurfacing. Whatever the thieves' intentions, the stolen treasures entered the dark world of art crime, a realm where priceless heritage becomes criminal commodity. The Louvre heist forces uncomfortable questions about protecting cultural heritage in an age of mass tourism and sophisticated crime. Museums worldwide face an impossible balance. They must remain accessible, fulfilling their educational and cultural missions by allowing millions to experience art and history. Yet this accessibility creates vulnerability. Every visitor is a potential threat. Every opening hour is an opportunity for crime. Traditional security models assume certain attack patterns: night infiltration, sophisticated electronics, small teams working in darkness. The Louvre thieves demonstrated that these assumptions create blind spots. By attacking during peak hours with crude but effective methods, they exploited gaps in protocols designed around different scenarios. Their audacity became their camouflage. Nobody expected criminals to work so openly. This forces a rethinking of museum security paradigms. If display cases can be breached in minutes despite reinforcement, what level of physical barrier is actually sufficient? If alarms trigger appropriate responses, but criminals complete theft before response arrives, what's the alarm's actual value? Some security experts suggest museums must embrace more aggressive response protocols. Armed guards positioned to engage threats immediately rather than prioritizing evacuation. Critics counter that this creates risks of armed confrontations in spaces packed with civilians, potentially more dangerous than theft itself. Others propose technological solutions: display cases that automatically lock down when alarms trigger, trapping thieves inside; enhanced barriers requiring so long to breach that response can arrive before theft completes; tracking devices embedded in valuable artifacts. But technology has limits. Determined criminals with inside knowledge can defeat most systems. The most sophisticated alarm is useless if security can't respond before thieves complete their work. Perhaps the core lesson is humility. No security is perfect. No protection is absolute. Museums housing irreplaceable heritage will always be targets for criminals sophisticated enough to identify and exploit vulnerabilities. The question isn't whether security can make theft impossible. It can't. The question is whether museums can make theft difficult enough that most criminals choose easier targets, while building international cooperation to recover stolen pieces when breaches succeed. The Louvre heist succeeded, but the thieves now possess artifacts they likely can't sell, can't display, can't enjoy. They've committed a crime that will be investigated for years, with resources devoted to recovery that dwarf the effort put into ordinary theft cases. Whether this represents a criminal victory or merely a temporary setback for French authorities remains to be seen. What's certain is that France and museums worldwide will never view security the same way. The 7 minutes that shook France changed assumptions about what's possible, what's vulnerable, and what must be protected. The stolen jewels may eventually be recovered. The innocence about security vulnerabilities is gone forever. As of today, the investigation continues. French authorities have released limited information, citing ongoing operations. International cooperation through Interpol and Europol expands the search across borders. Art crime specialists note that high-profile thefts often take years to resolve. Stolen pieces sometimes remain hidden for decades before resurfacing.
Criminals sometimes make mistakes that lead to arrests and recovery. Sometimes items are lost forever. For now, France's crown jewels exist somewhere in shadow, taken from their rightful place in 7 audacious minutes, leaving behind shattered glass, triggered alarms, and a nation grappling with questions about how to protect irreplaceable heritage in an age where audacity can defeat even the most sophisticated security. The Louvre remains open. Visitors still flock to marvel at human creativity spanning millennia. But in the Apollo Gallery, empty display cases serve as silent reminders that even the world's greatest museum isn't immune to human determination, clever planning, and 7 minutes of perfect execution.